All right, welcome back to another episode of Theology Applied. I am your host, Pastor Joel Webbin with Right Response Ministries. Today I've got Andrew Isker, CJay Engel. They're co-hosts of a podcast. They're coming on the show. They talk politics. They're both solid Christian men, but they're good thinkers, really, really good thinkers. They can actually think in categories. They don't just do the Jesus juke and, we'll just preach the gospel. They're actually okay with the state doing what God ordains in Scripture, Romans 13, and actually using the sword and exercising power. Christians having power is not inherently wicked or wrong. Christians are called to exercise power as much as God in His providence would allow for in responsible, righteous ways for the good of their neighbors, out of love for neighbor. If our neighbor is being overrun by an invasion of military-aged men at the border, we want to exercise righteous laws and use power in Christian ways to love and protect our neighbors. So those are the kinds of things that we're talking about. Predominantly, we're going to be talking about Donald Trump, the phenomenon of Donald Trump, and some of our predictions of what we think may be on the horizon this election year in 2024. So let's go ahead and get ready and start the show.
Applying God's Word to every aspect of life. This is Theology Applied.
All right, welcome back to another episode of Theology Applied. I'm your host, Pastor Joel Webbin with Right Response Ministries. And in this episode, we're going to be talking about the very real possibility that former President Donald J. Trump could be assassinated. Now, that's not all we're going to talk about, and I mean that in the literal sense. I don't mean metaphorically that politically he might. I really think that the regime hates him so much and is so desperate that the only way, I don't know if some of the court charges are going to work. There's multiple different strategies, threats to try to neutralize the political opponent to our current regime, get them in jail, but I don't know if it'll work. Rig an election and, voter booths and all that. There's a lot of different things, but it may be that the only way to keep him out of office is to put a bullet in his chest. And so we're not saying that's going to happen. I don't have a crystal ball. I'm neither a prophet nor the son of a prophet, but that's what we're going to be talking about. It's an election year. The people of God need to have discernment. We can't be naive. We can't be foolish. We need to know, all right, 2020, it wasn't random. It was an election year. That's a big part of the COVID thing. That's a big part of BLM and riots and the summer of love, all these things. What's going to happen in 2024? We don't know, but likely it will be as severe, as bad as 2020, if not worse. So that's the topic of the discussion. And for this topic, I wanted to get guys who I think are some of the better thinkers within the Reformed world of Christianity today. And so to help me with this, because they'll have ideas that I don't have and better ideas that I don't have. So I'm welcoming to the show CJay Engel and Andrew Isker, who are the co-host of Contra Mundum, their podcast. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thank you, Joel. Thanks for having us.
All right, tell our listeners about yourself. Tell them about the show. Tell them about you, and give your credentials, whatever you want to do.
Sure. Yeah. So Andrew and I have been doing this for a year or two, but we've been talking politics for 10 plus years, probably. Mm-hmm. We got our origins in a, clutch your pearls, the libertarian world, and not quickly, but eventually realized that there were myriad problems with that, and we began to see the world in a more realistic way, and we have gone rightward ever since. But we've grown together through numerous events, and it's been a fun journey. But basically, we have a podcast, and I spend a lot of my time doing all the reading and writing and commenting and things like that, just having a good time and fighting the good fight. It's funny because years ago, you think it's just a goofy thing to spend time reading and writing and sharing your thoughts, but it actually does change conversation and affects paradigms and shifts Overton windows, and it's really fun to see the effect and say, I've been part of that, but having conversations does matter. Minds can be changed, and people. I'm always surprised to see how quickly things are changing, and that reinvigorates me and motivates me to keep the momentum.
Yep. Amen. Andrew.
Yeah, I could just echo what CJay said there. That we've been we've been following this stuff for at least 10 years, and we've known each other I think since like 2014, and. Yeah, we were in the libertarian Ron Paul kind of world, and over time, we independently of each other both were like, "Wait, this world that we used to have doesn't really exist anymore," and we still certainly love liberty and freedom and the free market, things like that. But it's like, no, our whole society has been destroyed, and there is nothing we can do except for fight back and restore order. That is the biggest thing that's needed, is just a restoration of sanity and normal political order. And you're not going to be able to affect that by like appealing to the non-aggression principle, things like that. So yeah, we just kind of moved more rightward. I started reading, like Russell Kirk and men like that. I was reading Paul Gottfried, who's friends with CJay, and thinking, oh, these guys like get it, like they get what was going on and what we have to do and how a society functions and works, and where the political element of that libertarian world was very neglected. And so, yeah, we both kind of came at it from different directions, but we certainly at the time probably had very different theological perspectives. We're not, different within the Reformed world, at least. And over time, we both kind of came to the same position where it's like, no, there's an order that God has built into the universe. He's written it into the world, into his creation, and it perfectly conforms with what he says in his word too. So it's like, I was much more theonomic, and CJay was much more natural law, and we both were like, we don't really have to be in conflict at all with these things. That there's a way that both these perspectives, more or less fit together, and we viewed politics from the same frame. That politics is something that certainly in the last 100 years in the evangelical world is something that's been just completely ignored. That there is no Christian understanding of the political, and so for me, like I looked at that, I thought like, this is something that we have to recover and restore. There's so much, like we've I don't know if we mentioned Stephen Wolfe yet, but like he's done a ton of work just recovering what Reformed thinkers hundreds of years ago thought about politics. And it's like, wow, this stuff is great. This has been here the whole time. I can't believe it. People, wise theologians and pastors and writers and thinkers had a lot of good stuff to say about things that are relevant to us today. And we've just totally neglected all of that completely to have this sort of pietistic, almost Anabaptistic view of politics, where it's like, oh, I'm only going to preach the gospel and everything else, doesn't matter because I'm preaching the gospel. And it's like, that's not how Reformed people talked about their world at all 100, 200, 300 years ago. And so we've kind of dove headfirst into that. And it has been great. Like we've, like CJay said, you thought like, I'm just posting online and maybe I'm just shouting out into the void. Like is this just a hobby or just a fun thing to do? But like you actually see that this moves the needle for people. That it helps
look at people
think.
Look at people like in Oklahoma with Dusty Devers. He's heavily influenced by our circles. Maybe even came out of them. So these things have real world implications. And I think that right there in 10 years was like a huge white pill for me. Like just seeing that, like he reads our stuff. He echoes the themes that we echo. He's got priorities that reflect our own. And he's now writing bills to outlaw pornography in Oklahoma. It's like we can do this. This is happening.
It's possible. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Part of the problem is evangelicals and people in general, not just picking on Christians, but in today's world, our culture, we just can't think in categories. We can't speak in categories. And so, for a lot of Christians, it's just, preach the gospel alone, Trump is not the savior of the world. He's not, you're not going to have a political savior. Jesus is the savior. And it's like, we're talking past each other. Of course, Jesus is the savior. Which I resent those kind of remarks, because really that's actually levying a very serious accusation and charge. It's just straight up calling you a heretic. Because what they're asserting is that you worship Donald Trump, or you literally, but it's like, I don't believe that. I'm not praying to Donald Trump. Yeah. I haven't asked Donald Trump into my heart and to forgive me of my sins. Like that, but you're still doing this. So it's not even ignorance at that point. It's just it's devious and sinister. It's levying a false charge against a fellow brother, a sister in Christ. And so, but the problem is, part of it is, like I said, some of these guys are sinister, but for others who maybe are the less sinister breed, it's just astounding ignorance and stupidity. But we need to work on ourselves. We need to grow. We need to be discipled. We need to learn. We need to realize, okay, you know what? The civil magistrate bearing the sword, you can legislate morality. That's all legislation is. And absolutely, that makes a difference, because we're not just talking about eternal salvation. That's first and foremost. That's the highest. But we're also talking about, I'd love for my kids not to be in physical danger. I would like for them to be able to live a long life on the earth and be protected from degenerates and criminals and murderers. And that's the state does that. The state with the sword says, I'm sorry, you cannot do this wicked thing. And if you do this wicked thing, we're not going to preach the gospel to you. We're not going to ask you politely to stop. We're going to hang you. Like I recently had a show where I said, I was talking about I was talking about at the time, it wasn't that recent, I guess it was a while back, but I was talking about Ketanji Brown Jackson, and just saying that, I don't believe that women should serve in these positions of leadership. And in part because I don't believe that they're designed for it. I believe it's unbiblical, but God's not arbitrary with his rules and what the Bible teaches. I think they're not suited for it. And so I said, women are uniquely designed by God to nurture, but criminals don't need nurturing, they need hanging. And that's what men do well. Men hang well. And so, and that was like my big, quote, zinger. And so, but my point is that now I'm thinking about that now, and I'm thinking about sadly, she seems like a wonderful woman in many regards, but now I'm thinking about, Amy Coney Barrett. And I'm thinking, and here's the deal. I was adopted, right? So I'm just going to say this. Eric Kahn's, infamous tweet about adoption that got so much negative feedback. I was adopted. I'm pro-adoption. I think that's great. But one of the things right now, I think with evangelicals is we can't speak in categories. Also, evangelicals have been discipled to despise nature, right? So they only care about the spiritual. They hate, because that's a common denominator, whether it's adoption or whether it's tweets about why you should dress up on Sunday, or why working out matters, or why a man should have a gun to protect. All those are natural things. And nature, anything natural is viewed as vanity. It's viewed as sinful. It's viewed as, at best, it's viewed as a distraction and without value. At worst, some of the more devious players within evangelicalism will actually say that you're doing something destructive and it's bad and it's heretical.
Idolatry.
Exactly. Idolatry. And so my point is that with the adoption thing, what Eric Kahn was getting at, he wasn't dogging adoption. People are reading it in the least charitable light, but what he was trying to say is that nature matters. Nature matters. Once you're adopted, then that is your child. That is your child, and you have moral obligations as a parent to provide, to love, all those kinds of things. But he was talking about the decision to adopt before they've become your child, and saying you shouldn't adopt another child to become your child. They're not your child yet if it's going to put you in a precarious situation where you're compromised in your moral obligation to your natural children if you already have children. And there's case study after case study of adopting through the foster care system, which is a wonderful thing to do with wisdom, with prudence, but adopting an older child that's going to come in, and you have, a 2-year-old, and this older child is 13 and has been through that may not be the wisest thing to do. It was a perfectly reasonable tweet, but he gets destroyed. All that back to the Amy Coney Barrett. My point is it a coincidence that not a man, but a woman on the Supreme Court, it was all 5 women who overruled Texas.
4 women and John Roberts, but yeah.
Well, you're right. Yeah.
I think Joel was setting up for that.
Joel was right.
Women of both sexes, but it's 4 women and one dude that we can count on to vote the wrong way. But it's these 5 individuals overruling Texas' right to stop an invasion of military fighting age men at our border by the millions. That endanger our prodigy, our native citizens, our natural people, for the foreigner. So that the foreigner, we're gonna let the foreigner in as is it a coincidence that the woman that for most cases is more conservative by comparison on the court of 9 individuals, but on this particular issue that deals with loving the stranger at the cost of your natural kinsmen and your native citizens, And here's the woman who's not just a woman, but also has several children and many, more than one of them adopted. Is it? And I thought, as I was watching that, I thought about that and how it related to the Eric Kahn tweet. And I thought, gosh, I wish evangelicals could not be clutch their pearls and could speak in categories and not be such pietists and think about the ramifications of nature, and could have read Eric Kahn's tweet and saw he's got a point. And here it is, just a few weeks later. I don't think that's a coincidence. Just a few or maybe a couple months later, here's a real world situation with massive implications that is exactly what Eric Kahn, I mean, it's almost like he's a prophet, like what he was talking about. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, it's so Andrew said in the beginning that he was more theonomic and I was more natural law. That's not quite true. I've actually come to respect nature in a much more robust way over the last 3 years. I never would have considered myself. There's just the classic Thomist scholastic framework about that grace restores and upholds nature. It doesn't repudiate it. I think that framework, I think, is at the root of so many of our conversations, that people think the function of Christianity is basically to undermine and tear down nature, which is evil and disgusting and bad, and we should be suspicious and cynical of anything relating to nature and natural things. Whereas the classical view, the traditional view, the view that the Bible echoes or presumes in its own framework, is that it's God's nature. He created the order. He's the one that created the world, and nature reflects his own character. And what grace does is it allows us to reorient ourselves to pursue it and to build it up and to glorify God with it in a way that we couldn't before grace. So grace not only restores nature, but it reinvigorates us. And so the natural part of our humanity in our world is something that we should uphold and we should study and we should praise. I mean, the Eric Kahn's tweet, you see it reflected in the Supreme Court. You also see it reflected in the overall atmosphere of our political culture. It's very feminine, and that has consequences. I often talk to Andrew about the character of our totalitarianism. When you look at like Soviet Russia and China, those were very masculine totalitarianisms. Like you had a gun to your head and you had to submit. There were physical consequences. There were beatings. Those were all the aspects of communistic totalitarianism. Our totalitarianism is very much a feminine totalitarianism. You have to think in terms of psychological categories. You have to think in terms of emotional victims. You have to think in terms of love. Like everything's framed in love and hate and all of these things. It's a very feminine thing. If you hurt the wrong people, you can get fired. That never would have happened in communist Russia. I mean, they had outlawed homosexuality there. They still do. The Communist Party is the one that's actually right now. The Communist Party is the one that's seeking to outlaw homosexuality in Russia. Why? Because ours is a feminine totalitarianism, and it seeks to undermine nature. And that's one of the consequences of distorting nature. Is the political ramifications are distorted. They're grotesque. They're disturbing, and a lot of that is because we don't treat nature with a very pious in the good sense, a very pious mentality. We have no reverence for nature at all. We seek to destroy it, and our society reflects that endeavor.
Yep, well said, Andrew. What do you think?
Yeah, I think CJay is right that and I'm sorry for saying, oh yeah, you were the natural law guy. You got on it more earlier than I did. That's what I mean. But I think that's very true that a lot of people they I don't want to use the G word, but I think I gotta it's almost this Gnostic view that matter is bad, that the world is bad, that anything material and physical is axiomatically bad in contrast to the spiritual. Right, that's a huge undercurrent within American evangelicalism, and
100%.
And it perfectly fits with this kind of effeminate totalitarianism that CJay is describing, because that's precisely what they're trying to do. They're trying to destroy nature. They're trying to destroy the order of the world that God has created, and the communists in the 20th century, they were trying to do that too, but it was from like the top down, right? It was from like macroeconomics down that they were trying to reorder nature. Whereas our totalitarianism, it's from like the bottom up. It's like the fundamental basis of a society that God has created is that men are men and women are women, and a man takes a wife and they have children, and that's how society or human civilization continues on. But it's disordering that at the very root, right? And so rather than taking a human civilization from the top, saying, all right, here's how we're going to order the economy and use brute force to accomplish that. We're going to subvert what it means to be a man or a woman from the very get-go, from the very bottom. And so, the evangelical, like very pietistic, anti-material world of, viewpoint, perfectly meshes with that. And so it presents like no conflict to it whatsoever. So when you have a reinvigorated Christianity that is very that has a respect, or even CJay says like it views nature piously, right? It views it that God has created this world and it's good. It's marred by sin, but grace takes away that sin and restores nature to how he wants it to be. That presents a direct challenge to all of this. And so you see, like, we mentioned like Dusty, right? There was a story, as of when we're recording this, recently there was this story in the New York Post about him, and they're all freaking out about, one little state senator in Oklahoma, right? Like one of this small state that is flyover country. They don't care about it all. It's like, wow, how dare this guy try to roll back degeneracy in our glorious country. And right, they're threatened by this stuff because this is just basic Christianity and basic Christian moral order that he is working to restore. And but he's working to restore
with power, by exercising power. He's not just Dusty, and Dusty's a pastor. So he is preaching the gospel, and he's preaching the gospel to unbelievers in his personal life and evangelism and all those kinds of things, and unbelievers who might show up on a Sunday morning. But he's not only doing that. He's saying, I'm going to do that, but then I'm also going to run for office. He's now a state senator. He won in his district. And immediately, it's only been a few weeks, he's already submitted 9 different bills to abolish income tax, to abolish abortion, to abolish pornography. That's the one that the New York Post is freaking out about. Like, how in the world could such far-right extremist Christians think that that you could actually have a law, a legitimate law that says watching pornography is bad and you're not allowed to do it? And it's like we're so far gone at this point as a culture that that basic. I mean, that's just a basic Christian thought. That just seems. And even the sad thing is, even Christians, those, or at least they would profess to be Christians, they would say, yeah, pornography is bad, but you can't use laws to make it illegal. Yes, you can. All right, everybody's been asking, can I live stream your conference? And the answer is a resounding no. You will be there in person, or you will not be there at all. I'm just kidding. You actually can live stream the conference. We're excited to announce we're making it available to anybody and everybody who wants to watch this conference right as it's happening, which is March 1st and 2nd. That's a Friday and Saturday of 2024. What conference am I even talking about? It's called Blueprints for Christendom 2.0. We've got Pastor Douglas Wilson. We've got Dr. Joe Boot. We've got Brian Sauvé. We've got Eric Kahn. And then, of course, yours truly, Joel Webben. We've got 7 primary sessions in the conference, each one being probably 50 to 60 minute long sessions, lectures, sermons, whatever you want to call them, and then 2 live panels, each being an hour and a half long. Now, one of the panels is on biblical patriarchy. We're going to have Pastor Douglas Wilson available for that panel, and we decided to get Eric Kahn because Eric Kahn, biblical patriarchy, let's just be honest, it's a sensitive topic, but Eric Kahn, I think, is known as one of the most nuanced, careful, and sensitive individuals, especially on the Twitter streets. So we're going to have him as a part of that panel. It'll go really well. Then the second panel is Haunted Cosmos live show. You've got Brian Sauvé and Ben Garrett talking about the most unhinged things imaginable, hopefully some things that are actually truthful, Now, there will be some truthful things. They're going to stick to Scripture, and when they speculate, and you know they will, they'll at least let you know that it's speculation, and they won't pass it off as though it's in the infallible Word of God. So, live stream this conference. How do you do it? Go to patreon.com/Right Response Ministries. Again, that's patreon.com/Right Response Ministries. A lot of guys charge $50, $60, $80. We are asking that you would simply partner with us for $10 a month. And let's be real, you could do it 1 month, live stream all the content, and then cancel your subscription. And if you do, no harm, no foul. If you want to stick with us and support this ministry and what God's doing through Right Response, then praise God. That's great, and we thank you. Either way, technically, it's only $10.
It's really,
Yes,
it's really important to emphasize that, like, this is considered an extreme right position to want to ban pornography. But when you look at 1,500, 1,800 years, whatever, of Christendom, it's only the last, maybe 40 years where this was considered like a legitimate human right.
Right.
They're the extremists. It's such a mainstream centrist position to consider pornography as a criminal activity. It's the mainstream centrist position. We're the moderates here for our position. So don't get gaslit into thinking that you're an extremist on this.
Or you
are part of the overall current of 1,000 years of legal tradition.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, okay. So we got to do this. I know that there's more that we could say, but I do want to get into, the way that I framed it in the beginning, in the introduction. I want to get into some predictions. We did this, what got us into this was doing introductions and, who are you guys and what are you interested in? What do you do? And, that got us into politics, in a Christian view and biblical view of politics, because that's what you do. And I think that's really great. And we can come back to some of that. But I also want to do, I want to do, some predictions, right? And we're not saying, these are not prophecies, right? We're not doing the, this will happen, right? Like James Lindsay kind of thing. Like if, in the month of June, I predict, but it will happen that there'll be an extremist reaction to a gay pride thing and blah, blah, blah. And it's going to destroy, the right. And so we're not doing that. What we're doing, instead of saying this will happen, we're saying something will probably happen in an election year to try to get Donald J. Trump to not be elected. And I think one real possibility is assassination, and not even from someone who's an American citizen, not even necessarily a 3-letter agency that's been hijacked, whatever, the FBI, but even other countries. I mean, the whole world has a vested interest in what happens in America and who our president is. And if you have a certain president who has a proven track record of not being soft when it comes to wars in the Middle East, and when it, who's far more willing to put tariffs, with economics with other countries to shut down wars, who straight up used to tweet at 3 a.m. at night, I'll bomb Kim Jong-un, so my point is, it's not just Americans that, never Trump, I hate Trump, the screaming, libtard with purple hair, but it's people, regimes in China, it's Ukraine. It's, all over the world, there is an incentive for many, 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 many people worldwide to not have that guy in office, to the point of, and we know what the world's capable of doing. I mean, China already literally released a virus on the entire world to stop an election. I really do think that was a big part of the incentive and motive, and I do not think it was an accident. And so, all that being said, if they did it, back in 2020, I think we're naive, right? We don't want to be doomsday. We trust in Christ. We love Christ. We're going to be obedient. We're going to keep calm and cool heads, but we're also not going to be naive, stupid, people who think that we live in la la land. There are wicked people in the world, in our government and in other governments in the world. And so Christians should just be aware. Otherwise, what did we learn in 2020? It's election time. It's going to be a crazy year. Here are some things that could happen, and here's how Christians should be thinking, and here's how we should prepare. That's what I'd love to do with the second half of the episode. What do you guys think of predictions and possibilities? How should Christians be thinking about?
Yeah, you go ahead, CJ, and make your prediction.
Yeah. Okay. Well, first of all, I think Trump is the most popular I think Trump, like if we lived in, the world that people say we live in about democracy and the right of the people to select their own political leaders, all that stuff, Trump would win hands down. Like case closed. He would have won in 2016, and he would just smash it in this cycle as well. That said, we don't live in that world. Obviously, I mean, they brag about this in the Washington Post that they need to do what they can to prevent him from becoming the president. They will do what they can, and they're experts, they're professionals in selecting political candidates who are not popular. This is what they do in Ukraine. This is what they do in Europe, and this is what they do here. They are color revolutionaries. They know how to use media. They know how to use lawfare. They know how to use incentives, economic incentives, personal threats. They will do what they can to prevent Trump from winning. So I think so how successful are they going to be? To what end would they do this stuff? I mean, I think they'll start with a layer of indictments, see how that goes. I think that will make Trump even more popular. I think people are sort of in the mood that they actually want to see him get indicted, and they want to see him get elected, from prison, basically, and pardon him. So I mean, seriously, but evangelicals jump in on this and say, yeah, because you like criminals and you're just, you're not very Christian in the way you approach things, but they never ask themselves, how is it that heritage America, that people who can find 4, 5, 6 generations of roots here in America, how is it that these forgotten Americans would despise the system so much that they want to see a political candidate in that situation challenge the regime in such a humiliating way? Nobody asks what they're feeling, what they're going through. Yeah. They don't care. So the question is, to what extent do the political elites hate everyday Americans? And I think that they would do anything to get Trump elected. I don't think the indictments will work, as I just said. So they have to go to the next layer. The next layer includes things like, all the legal rules that they changed in the run up to 2020. And so that's the next layer of things. And then they could go forward. They could steal the election. They've already proven that they could do it. And I want to be careful with your channel, but they're very skilled in getting what they want, their preferred candidate. So I don't think that it's something that we should take lightly. I think that they have experience. They also have all the mechanisms and infrastructure set up to do this again. And then, of course, worst case scenario, would they go to the extent of ending his life? I don't see why they wouldn't. I mean, they do this all the time. They hate, he's just a proxy, for the people they actually hate in the United States. And just like he's just a proxy, for our own political interests. It's not like, we looked at all the candidates and we're like, we're going to choose this liberal cosmopolitan real estate developer in New York. No, he's a proxy that expresses our discontent. That's what he is.
Which that is a phenomenon in itself. I was talking to, one of my friends recently and just saying, how is it that a guy forged in the belly of Hollywood, a billionaire, how is it that everyday Americans, not the elite, but blue collar, working Americans in flyover country say that's our guy. I identify with him. It's not because of his economic status. Certainly, he has nothing in common with a guy who makes $45,000 annually. When he's worth a lot of money, and so it's not that, and it's not even his character. Like I'm perfectly happy to say, like I don't think I would have Donald Trump babysit my kids, but. Obviously, I think DeSantis is the better man in terms of character, in terms of lots of other things. So then, what's the piece of identification, like the mugshot, which is, that's a historic, iconic picture that like kids will be see that in textbooks, when they arrested Donald Trump and actually took his picture, which was a bad move. If you look at the polls in the primaries, when was it that Trump, right? Because there was a moment where it was like an 11 point difference between Trump and DeSantis, and then Trump just launched into the stratosphere. And DeSantis started going down. This is my point. It was when they started doing more indictments, when they started attacking him more. That's the identification piece. The American that identifies with Trump, it's not because of his, he's a billionaire and most people are poor. They identify with him because he keeps getting picked on. He keeps getting pushed. He keeps getting pressed. He keeps getting lied about. He keeps getting charges on, like the legal system coming after him for just for existing. And that's where people say he's like me. He's like me. That's why, and you're right, CJ. Instead, what evangelical, pastors sadly do is they see evangelicals turn out in droves in 2016 for Trump, and then in the primaries again now showing up for Trump instead of DeSantis in Iowa, and it wasn't even close. And then immediately our evangelical leaders, what they do is they chastise the Christians for how could you turn out for Trump and not turn out for DeSantis, who is the better man with better character. And I'm not even debating those things. I think that's true. But instead of asking the question, why did you turn out for this guy? Why? So immediately it's a chastisement, it's a rebuke, and they think, because they assume the only reason why Christians could vote for Trump is because evangelicals today are godless, because evangelicals today don't have morals, because evangelicals today are also corrupted and compromised and morally, spiritually, and because they only think in moral, spiritual categories. They can't think outside of that and think of power, systems, the regime, and thinking, hey, maybe they want Trump in office not because he's a great guy that they want to make the godfather of their next kid. Maybe they want Trump in office because if there was a literal wrecking ball on the ballot, they would vote for that.
Right, exactly.
You know what I mean? Exactly.
Yeah. Yep. So that's my predictions. Is they wish if they could get away with it, they would go all the way. So that's my prediction.
Would you like to get control of your money and set up a system that will guarantee for the rest of your life tax-protected compounding interest and growth? How about having 24/7 electronic access to your money for funding wisely chosen investments, home improvements, and other large expenditures without going to the mainstream banks? This is not a dream, but it could actually be a reality when working with our sponsor, Private Family Banking. See their contact information in the show notes below. To make this season even brighter, Private Family Banking is giving away a pair of tickets, a $500 value, for the upcoming Blueprints for Christendom 2.0 conference, which is taking place on March 1st, 2nd, and 3rd of 2024 in Taylor, Texas. To enter the ticket giveaway, join their email list by sending an email to banking@privatefamilybanking.com. Again, that's banking@privatefamilybanking.com with the subject line of your email saying tickets. Then include your full name and mailing address in the body of the email. The ticket giveaway entry period will end at midnight Central Time on February 13th, 2024, and the winner will be notified via email on February 14th. You must be 18 years of age or older to enter, and only one email per person can be entered into this giveaway drawing.
Yeah, mine, similar to that. I think that... Right. They showed what they can do in 2020. I mean, there was the Time magazine story right after the election about, just bragging about, all the money that Mark Zuckerberg put into it and all of the election law changes and how they fortified the election, right, to prevent Donald Trump from getting reelected. And so that they bragged about it, right? And it was at the time where you couldn't say the things they said in Time magazine on Twitter or Facebook. Like your posts would get taken down if you verbatim said the same things they said in that Time magazine story, but they can say it, right? So they've proven that they can do these things, and they've proven, overseas the kind of stuff that they've done. And 2020 was this color revolution where you have the pandemic, which is mysterious in its origins, to say the least. And then you have radical left-wing agitators provoke riots throughout the country for months. And this is the same. This is literally what they did in Ukraine in 2014. And so, other than the pandemic, and so they're well practiced at these kinds of operations. And the lawfare thing is, and the indictments. I think like the DC case is one where, right, he's not going to get a fair trial in Washington, DC. He's not going to be before a jury that is going to look at it impartially or anything. It's like the DC case is going to be like the Chauvin case in Minneapolis, where it's like he's probably going to lose it no matter what his lawyers argue, no matter what evidence there is. It's already written. Like he's going to be found guilty. And so the question there is, the timing. Does it happen before the election, or will it continue, after he's elected president? That might obscure things a little bit, but they've attempted these things, and I think they attempted the indictments thinking that once he's indicted, that'll make people think, that'll make him drop in the polls, and then someone else, DeSantis or Nikki Haley or whoever else was running at the time, will take over. Right? I think that was the play that they were trying to run. Because they fundamentally don't understand the phenomenon of Trump that you guys were just talking about, is like people want him because they hate the regime, they hate the system, they hate the people that are running things that hate them. And so he's this avatar for them, or this proxy for them. And that's why his popularity was boosted, where people are like, no, that isn't right. I mean, the same thing with like the Russia stuff during his administration. Right, people looked at that and they're like, "This is silly. Like, he didn't do anything wrong, and they're impeaching him over this. That's nuts." And so
every guy who got fired from his job in 2020 and 2021 because he had a racist tweet that his boss found. Race is spelled R-A-Y. What it immediately they identified and felt like that's me. So when they see them come at, with the Steele dossier or with the Russian collusion or with, whatever it is, all these different things, they that's the connecting piece. The connecting piece is not, I grew up doing shows in Hollywood. We both have that in common. No, of course not. Like, I also have hundreds of millions of dollars, and we have, no, of course that's not the connecting piece. The connecting piece is every day people say that the system is rigged against minorities, when the facts are right in front of my face. It's rigged against me.
It's the opposite.
And has been for decades.
Yeah.
And I know it, and I feel it. My kids feel it. My wife feels it. And this is the first guy who agrees with me, who says it, and that same system is attacking him. And every time, but the difference is it attacks me and I can't do anything. It attacks him, and it's like launching a nuke at Godzilla. He just gets bigger and stronger. And then all of a sudden, it's like, you don't want to be friends with Godzilla. You don't want to have Godzilla over for dinner, but all of a sudden you find yourself, in Tokyo. And when at first you think Godzilla is the problem, but then when Mothra and all these other, like 1,000 other monsters come out of Hollow Earth, and they start destroying the city, and Godzilla all of a sudden turns and starts wrecking shop on them, then you find yourself in the street saying, Godzilla. That's just like, that's the natural reaction. And I don't think that means that you're not a Christian or you don't care about morals or you don't care about character. Think, pastors, evangelicals, stop for a moment and think. And show a little bit of all that sympathy that you showed when you were woke 15 minutes ago. Yes, we remember you were woke. You're writing books against it now, but you were woke. All the sympathy that you had towards every single person in the church on the left, not that long ago, like last Wednesday, could you show a fraction of that? A fraction of that to the people who pay your salary, to the people who have been faithful year after year, tithing, going to the It's such an insult,
and that's the thing too. Like they talk about, we can bring up like Joe Rigney and empathy and things like that. Like they're all about empathy, right? Empathizing with the outcast and the stranger and the people, which just is code for the left, right? They're totally empathetic to the left, but normal average Americans who have jobs and families and mortgages and are trying to get by, and see someone who they think might make my life better, might make my country better. And because that's his vision. And this is why he connects with people is because he presents this positive vision of what he wants the country to be, what we want the country to be. We want the country to be great again, to say that it's not, and it could be once more. Like that's a powerful thing that connects with a lot of people. And they can't empathize in the least with that. They can't understand what normal people are going through. They can't understand the fact that all of our major cities are completely overrun with crime, and people are very concerned with that. They can't understand that tens of millions of foreign people from third world countries rushing your borders might actually be a bad thing for ordinary people. Right? They can't even conceptualize that state of mind. that regular people have. And so you have people like Beth Moore who will say, oh, they just want a bully and a nasty person. They've fallen, and it's their, all of this moral disorder and evangelicalism. That's what it's a symbol of. And it's like, no, it's not that at all. And they don't want to care about the people of our country at all. And it's much easier to just chastise them.
Well, the other thing too is, it goes back to our conversation about nature and grace. I mean, the response to all this is, you're putting too much stock in your own well-being here on earth. You're putting too much stock in, the quality of your life, the material value of the things that you possess and the things, God says not to worry about your food. Look at the birds of the air. And so they use this very pious language basically to undermine our own natural instinct, our God-given natural instincts to take care of our families, to build communities, to build kingdoms on earth. I mean, that's part of our human nature. That's part of the task that was given to Adam and his posterity, is to build natural things. And so we should care about our well-being, because it's not just about us. It's about our children. It's about our grandchildren. And the mentality that we are pilgrims on earth is being distorted in such a way as to undermine 1,000 years of Christian development, of Christian society. So every time someone talks about things like, well, I can no longer afford to eat half my food bill that I used to, like 4 years ago. I can only afford half of what I was able to buy 4 years ago. Well, you're just putting too much stock in the natural things of life. God gave us creation to nourish us, to build us, so that we might be strong and that earthly things might reflect heavenly order. And I think that they completely despise and repudiate these classical categories of natural kingdom building.
Right. And one thing I want to add to that, CJay, is, so it's definitely the grace nature distinction. They think that grace it supersedes nature, it eradicates nature, replaces nature. Then now the more conservative evangelical types will, they'll kind of be inconsistent with that, with like Galatians 3:27. There's neither male nor female, slave or free, Jew or Greek. And so when it comes to male or female, they'll acknowledge, but I'm not woke, like a man's still a man and a woman's still a woman, and we're complementarian and we have only male pastors, but then they all of a sudden shift hermeneutics when it comes to Jew or Greek, right? So male or female, like that still exists. Jew or Greek, that, there's only one race, the human race. And I understand that we all descended from Adam. We are all human beings. But there are different races or ethnicity or whatever you want to use. And that's part of the
it's one of those terms that's like there's plurality and there's unity in it. All it means is common ancestor. Right. So the unity part of it is that we all have a single common ancestor.
Right.
The plurality part of it is there's downstream ancestors that we don't share. I mean, it's really not that complicated.
It's not. It's not. And to care about the downstream ancestors, to say, I care about Adam and Eve, and I care about my common ancestry, but I also care about Ireland, or whatever. That's okay. And so, anyways, that should be permissible. But what I was going to say is, I think it's three factors with evangelical leaders and why they don't get the Trump phenomenon and why they're constantly disparaging their own congregants, parishioners. Is one, not understanding grace, elevating nature, restoring nature. Instead, they think it just replaces nature. That natural things don't matter. Natural born children don't matter. Borders to protect natural citizens doesn't matter. Working out to have natural good health as a good steward, not idolatrize, not vanity, but I want to live to see my grandkids. Well, that's not spiritual enough. That's too physical. That's too vain. They don't understand any of these things. Thinking I should have a gun in case there's an intruder, especially since we have an invasion of military-aged men, and I live in Texas. Maybe I should have a gun. Or that's not trusting the Lord and blah blah. So they despise nature. The second thing I would say is a negative view of the past, and then a nihilistic view of the future. I think those are the three. And so what I'm trying to say is it a coincidence that right now you got a bunch of young Christian men? What are they reading? A bunch of them have an infatuation all of a sudden with postmillennial, hopeful future. Right? And I'm not saying you have to be post-millennial to think that the future could be bright, that the foreseeable future for you, your kids. I've learned that. At first I was like, I am post-millennial. I'm not moving off of that. That is my eschatology. I think it's right. I think it's right for biblical reasons, but not just functional reasons, because functionally a guy could be premillennial, and I've got a lot of friends who are, or all millennial, and still say, Yeah, but we could still win this thing, and we have a moral obligation to try. And we still want the world to be a better place, our country to be a better place for our children, our children's children. And so I'm happy to be on the team. But the point is, no matter how you slice it, whether it's a long vision through postmillennial eschatology or whatever, it's a positive vision of the future right now. So what's taking off over these past few years, like by storm? What's the big trends? Positive view of the future. And a lot of that's like more than ever before, a bunch of guys hopping on the post-mill train. That's not a coincidence. Look at that. Recognize that. Dissect that, pastor, evangelical leader. Think about why would that be? And then the last one, positive view of the future. Why is every young Christian man on the planet right now reading Defenders of the West, Sword and Scimitar? Like what? It's not a coincidence, right? They're all of a sudden, there's a theme there, and that theme gives you answers. It's not random. It means something. So what is it? All of a sudden, guys are reading practical books by non-Christians about natural things like health, and all of a sudden, guys are reading books with a positive vision of the past, saying maybe the Crusades weren't the worst thing ever, and maybe Richard the Lionheart was. Maybe I'm going to meet him in heaven. He was a good guy. Or more recent history, maybe Stonewall Jackson was a good guy, that Martin Luther King Jr. Is actually in hell right now, but Stonewall Jackson is in heaven, and maybe I should prepare for that reality. And then lastly, a positive future, like the post-millennial infatuation that's been going. My point is just to say, these are not coincidences. There is a theme. And Trump, so bringing that all the way back to Trump, and then I'll stop rambling, but in 4 words, I mean, this really is, I mean, it's incredible. In 4 words, make America, so not the other side of the world, not foreigners, not strangers, but my native people, this country, make America great. So in the future, we're going to do something that is going to bear fruit down the road, make it great again. It was good in the past. So he literally, right there, he said, here, my people, great in the future, like it was in the past. And the most popular political character in the last 50 years with 4 words. I mean, a bunch of other stuff too, but with 4 words. And I think if evangelicals, like Beth Moore, would stop chastising the base. I mean, she really, like John MacArthur nailed it. She just needs to go home. But other evangelical leaders who actually are called to leadership roles in the church, but who are very similar to Beth Moore, other Moores, such as Russell Moore, if they would just stop for a moment and think about that and think, maybe there's something to that. Does the Bible actually allow for this? Or maybe even give us an impetus that this is right, it should be pursued, that that the spiritual and eternal matters most, but that nature and temporal things still have some value, and that we do have a moral obligation to steward these things in a heavenly direction, and that the past of 1,500 years of Christendom, maybe it wasn't perfect. We're talking about human beings; they're not sinless, but maybe Constantine, as Thomas Watson literally says in his 10 Commandments books, he was a nurturing father. He literally lists Constantine by name and says, be like Constantine, who was a nurturing father to the church. Like that, and so maybe that's not crazy. And then also in the future, whether you think it's the next 50 years or 50,000, that maybe we're not, the Bible doesn't dictate nihilism. Historic premillennialism, sure, but dispensational premillennialism that asserts and mandates that things must progressively get worse and worse and worse in the future, that dog won't hunt. That's just that eschatology, because that's more than just eschatological. That's a hermeneutic and a way of reading this. Like that dispensationalism is like watching the last dinosaur slowly walk off into the sunset. Like that, that dude, he's dead. He's short shelf life. It's not coming back. So my point is, could we just look at the reasons, and instead of blaming and chastising, ask some questions. Maybe we've missed it in the post-war consensus for the last 60 years, and maybe there's something to this.
No, I 100% agree with you. I mean, just the fact that there's certain like a demeanor or like an instinct that Western Christians have had in the past, which is to honor those who came before you. I mean, you mentioned Thomas Watson. That's actually relatively recent. Right. So,
exactly. That's why.
Yeah. So like just up until maybe 60 years ago, people did have this we are the product of good men that came before us and blazed a trail. Now today we're expected to apologize for them, to repudiate them, and to constantly remind ourselves that those who came before are always bad because they're in the past, and chronologically we're more advanced, and this is just the way that history goes. They never consider the fact that, flyover Americans are reading like historical tomes. They're reading biographies of great men. They're not supposed to do this. The intellectual class does not like them to do this. And so when they look to a leader like Trump, who's not like in a silo, like he's not a good man. Like you would never, like 10 years ago, you'd not have said like Trump is like an ideal Christian man. He's not a Constantine, but that type of man, the fact that he's popular reflects the fact that people are learning from the past, and they recognize that leaders like him, great men of history, they are the catalysts for making society great again. So they are looking for, and the intellectual class just cannot bear this. It completely wrecks everything that they've built up about themselves and about flyover Americans, about everyday Americans, and about the Christianity, the Christendom that they actually seek to tear down.
Right. And the other thing they built up is their revisionist history. And so if people are actually reading, men of antiquity, actual history, and not their revisionist history, their fake narrative, then people are going to wise up. They're going to say, wait, this thing that we want, that we've been told we could never have, it just can't happen. We just preach the gospel. No, it's not just that we could have it. It's Christendom's not just a dream of something that can't come to fruition. Not only is it possible, it's been done before. On this soil.
That's the thing.
That long ago.
I've been trying to say this about Christian nationalism. Like, it's just a label, right? I didn't like it at first, but it's changed the conversation. So that means it was a good label. Right. But what it means, it's not this creation of this new, never been done utopian framework, this blueprint for like, we have the secret sauce to make a good society. Right. It's actually the historical norm. Like this, like it was reflected in England. It was reflected in Germany. It was reflected in Christendom more generally. Like this is our past. This is, it's calling for Christians to revitalize those that came before. It's actually the historical norm. It's not this new creative thing. The new creative thing is liberal democracy and secularism. That's the new creative thing. Yeah.
Andrew. Go ahead, Andrew. Give us your final thoughts, and then we'll land the plane for this episode. But I think this has been super helpful.
Yeah. So, just to go back to the Trump thing and the whole title of the episode. I think if I were like, I don't gamble, I don't bet, and nobody should. But if I were going to put like money on it, I'd say it's like 60-40 that they will attempt it, because things are going taking them out. I think
you don't want to say it, but
I don't want to.
Yeah, I hear you.
I think they will. At least there will be a serious attempt on him, and it only because like you look at how terrible things are. Everyone knows, economically, socially, everything else is in a very, very bad place. I mean, even people who are maybe predisposed to vote for Democrats will admit this. And so he is going to continue to be very, very popular and poll very, very well in many states. Like I think in New York right now, he's like in single digits behind Biden, which is astounding.
That's crazy. Yeah, 9. I think it was like 9 points under Biden in New York.
Yeah. So I mean, almost. I mean, you're getting within striking distance at the margin of error, and so like. So if he's looking like he's going to win in a landslide, and there's no amount of fortification that they can do to prevent him taking office, like that is like the biggest thing. They cannot possibly allow him to return at all. And so, bearing that in mind, like there's one final thing they can do to prevent him from going in. And so if it looks like there are no other options, they'll do it.
They can suicide him.
Yeah. I mean, maybe,
Jeffrey Epstein him.
Yeah. In prison, maybe, who knows? But yeah, I think that's going to happen. And if it does, I think Christians and pastors and leaders need to think through why was he popular? Why is the country going to be and the majority of the country going to be incensed that this occurred? And what do you do from here? And even the question of what do you do from here is relevant, even if they don't do it, because he's like 78 or 79 years old. Like he's not going to be around much longer in any event. And so where do we go from here once he's off the stage? Right? What are we going to do? Because the anger at the regime that is deep in the populace of the country, that's not going away. And it's going to look for someone to take up that mantle once again. And so,
correct.
Are we going to be part of it, or are we going to oppose it, continue to oppose it? Right. That's the question.
CJay, did you want to say something?
Nope.
All right.
Nope,
that's great. Let's plug you guys again, because I want guys to listen. I think your voices are important, what you're writing, what you're saying. Your podcast is Contra Mundum. It's where can they find you?
It's on YouTube.
Yeah.
We stream it on our Twitter, but like YouTube's the best place probably right now for us. But follow me on Twitter at Contra Mordor. And I always post the live links for the podcast there, and that's when you get my fun tweets and my actual well thought out thoughts, not just my rambling. So follow me on Twitter.
You have good stuff there. Yeah, definitely follow.
And then Isker, what's your handle?
Mine?
Yeah, on Twitter.
At Boniface Option is my handle, and we on every Friday we've been trying to be consistent. Now we do a live stream on Fridays, usually at 5:00 Central. This week might be a little different because I'm in Florida. I don't know if everybody heard when Joel mentioned DeSantis. He sent a blue heron to attack our stream here, and so I don't know if you heard that, but we might be a little bit late this week, but in the next couple of weeks. But usually Fridays 5 p.m. Central is when we live stream, and it's Joel, like the live streams are fun because you can interact with people, and
right.
I think some people, they really like when I start chuckling at a comment in the middle of the stream. That makes them happy. But it's been great to do. We have seen a lot of people, really like. I get emails and messages from people saying like, "Hey, I didn't know what to think about politics and things like this, and I wasn't like looking for someone to just give like a vaguely Christian spin on whatever you would hear on the Daily Wire." Right. Actually, what we're trying to do is get Christians to think very deeply about politics and think about it in very old ways, and think about it beyond just like, who am I going to vote for, and how does how do elections work and things like that, but rather think about it in a much, much bigger picture than really anybody else.
Great. So all of our listeners, check out, we'll put it in the description, their YouTube channel. So you can just look in the description, find the link for the YouTube channel. Again, that's Contra Mundum. And then you got at Boniface Option if you want to follow Isker on Twitter. And then Contra Mordor, is that what you said?
Contra Mordor.
Okay, Contra Mordor. So follow these guys, listen to them, give them your support. And then also with Isker, you can go to Amazon if you want to buy his book, The Boniface Option, that came out recently. That's fantastic. A lot of guys have been reading it. I read it. He did a great job. So check out the book too. So thank you guys for coming on the show. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Joel.